The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was silent. Ambassador Vortek of the Krillian Empire stood at the center of the room, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. Around him, diplomats from 12 different species watched the human delegation with expressions that ranged from shock to complete bewilderment. Admiral Sarah Chen had just finished speaking. Her words still hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. "We accept the Vraxian surrender," she had said, "and we will help them rebuild." Vortek's translator device clicked and hummed. He checked it twice, certain that something must be wrong with the translation, but no, the words were correct. The humans truly intended to help their enemies. The Vraxians had attacked Earth 3 years ago. They had killed millions of humans. They had burned cities to ash. They had enslaved entire populations on the colony worlds. And now, after the humans had finally pushed them back, after the human fleet had surrounded their home world, the Vraxians had surrendered. And the humans were going to help them. "I do not understand," Vortek said, stepping forward. His voice was high and sharp, the way all Krillian voices sounded to human ears. "Ambassador Chen, perhaps my translator is broken. Did you say you will help the Vraxians?" Sarah Chen was a tall woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She had seen much in her 60 years of life. She had been on Earth during the first attack. She had lost her husband and her youngest son, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "Your translator is working fine, Ambassador. We will help them rebuild. We will provide food, medicine, and building materials. We will help them recover." The Thraxian delegate, a being that looked like a walking crystal, made a sound like breaking glass. This was their way of laughing. "The humans have gone mad," they announced. "The stress of war has broken their minds." "We are not mad," said General Marcus Webb, who stood beside Admiral Chen. He was a large man with dark skin and a face full of scars. He had led the human ground forces in the war. He had seen things that would give most beings nightmares for life. "We know exactly what we are doing." "Then explain it to us," Vortek demanded. "Because in all my 300 years of life I have never seen such foolishness. The Vraxians attacked you, they killed your people, they took your worlds, and now you will reward them for this." Admiral Chen took a deep breath. "It is not a reward, it is mercy." The word hung in the air. Several of the alien delegates consulted their translators. The concept was difficult to translate into some languages, in others it simply did not exist. "Mercy," repeated Vortek slowly. "I know this word, it means to not punish when punishment is deserved, but why, what do you gain from this?" "We gain peace," said Admiral Chen. "True peace, not just the absence of war but the presence of understanding." The Krillian ambassador shook his large head. "This makes no sense. In my culture, when an enemy surrenders, we take everything from them. We take their ships, their technology, their resources. We make them pay for every life they took. This is justice." "That is revenge," said General Webb quietly. "It is not the same thing." "And what is wrong with revenge?" asked the delegate from the Morkai Collective, a hive-mind species that appeared as a swarm of small insects moving in perfect unison. "Revenge is balance. They hurt you, so you hurt them. This is the way of the universe." Admiral Chen looked around the room at all the alien faces. She saw confusion, disbelief, and in some cases, open hostility. These beings had been part of the Galactic Council for thousands of years. They had fought countless wars among themselves, and in all that time they had never considered another way. "May I tell you a story?" she asked. Vortek made a gesture of permission. "If it will help explain this madness, then yes." Admiral Chen smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. 400 years ago, my ancestors lived in a small country called Japan. They were at war with another country called the United States. It was a terrible war. Both sides did horrible things. And then near the end of the war, the United States dropped 2 bombs on Japan. These were nuclear weapons, the most destructive things humans had ever created. The room was very quiet now. Several delegates had heard about human nuclear weapons. They were primitive compared to modern technology, but the humans had used them on themselves. This was considered proof that humans were a violent and unstable species. "The bombs killed over 200,000 people," Admiral Chen continued. "Most of them were civilians, children, families, people who had never fought in the war. Japan surrendered after this. They had no choice." "And then the Americans destroyed Japan completely," Vortek said, nodding. This is logical, this is what any sensible species would do. No, said Admiral Chen, that is not what happened. Instead, the Americans helped Japan rebuild. They provided food and medicine. They helped create a new government. They invested in Japanese industry and education. Within a few decades, Japan became one of the most successful nations on Earth, and Japan and America became close allies, friends. The room erupted in noise. Every delegate was talking at once, their translators creating a chaos of overlapping voices. Vortek held up his hands for silence. This cannot be true, he said. You are making this up. I am not, said Admiral Chen. I am living proof that it is true. My grandmother was born in Japan 2 years after the war ended. My grandfather was an American soldier who stayed to help with the rebuilding. They met, they fell in love, and they married. My family exists because of mercy, because of forgiveness. General Webb stepped forward. There are other examples. After the great wars of our 20th century, the victors helped the losers rebuild. Germany, which had caused 2 world wars, was helped by those it had attacked. Today, Germany is one of the most peaceful and prosperous nations on Earth. But why? Vortek asked again, his voice was almost pleading now. I truly do not understand. You could have crushed them, you could have made them suffer as they made you suffer. Why did you not? Admiral Chen thought for a long moment before answering. Because suffering does not end suffering, hatred does not end hatred. If we had destroyed Japan, we would have created a wound that would never heal. Instead, we created a friendship that has lasted centuries. The same is true now with the Vraxians. The Vraxians are not human, the Thraxian delegate pointed out. They are completely different from you. How do you know this will work? We do not know, Admiral Chen admitted. But we believe it is worth trying because the alternative is eternal war. The alternative is becoming the very thing we fought against. Vortek sat down heavily. His mind was struggling to process what he was hearing. In 300 years, he had learned many things about the galaxy. He had learned that strength was survival. He had learned that mercy was weakness. He had learned that the only way to deal with enemies was to destroy them completely. And now the humans were telling him that everything he knew was wrong. I need time to think about this, he said finally. This is very different from anything I have ever known. Admiral Chen nodded. Take all the time you need. We are not asking you to change your ways, we are simply showing you ours. The Vraxian ambassador had been silent throughout this entire exchange. He was a thin, pale creature with large black eyes and long arms. His name was Xyrith, and he had come to the council expecting death. He had come expecting the humans to announce their terms for Vraxian destruction. Instead, he had heard something impossible. You truly mean this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. You will help us after everything we have done. Admiral Chen turned to face him. For a long moment she just looked at him. This was a member of the species that had killed her husband, her son, millions of her people. Yes, she said, we truly mean it, but understand this, Ambassador Xyrith. This is not because we have forgotten what happened. We will never forget. This is because we choose to move forward instead of backward. We choose to build instead of destroy. We choose hope instead of despair. Xyrith's large eyes filled with a liquid that might have been tears. I do not understand you humans, he said, but I am grateful, more grateful than I can express. The meeting ended soon after that. The alien delegates filed out, most of them still confused and disturbed by what they had witnessed. They would talk about this for years to come. They would debate whether the humans were wise or foolish, strong or weak. But one thing was certain, the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. 3 months passed. The human relief ships arrived at the Vraxian home world of Vrax Prime. They carried food, medicine, building materials, and thousands of human volunteers who had come to help with the rebuilding. Commander James Torres stood on the bridge of the relief ship Mercy and looked down at the planet below. It was a gray world covered with the scars of war. Human weapons had destroyed many of the major cities. The Vraxian military had been completely shattered. But there was still life down there, billions of Vraxians who had nothing to do with the war, children who had never hurt anyone, families who just wanted to live in peace. Begin landing procedures, Torres ordered. Let's get to work. The first shuttle landed in the capital city of Vrax. Torres was on board, along with a team of doctors, engineers, and diplomats. They were met by a delegation of Vraxian officials who looked nervous and confused. "We expected soldiers," said the lead official, a female named Kyrath. "We expected weapons, instead you bring medicine." Tors smiled. "We brought everything you need: food for the hungry, medicine for the sick, tools and materials to rebuild your cities, and people who want to help." Kyrath stared at him for a long moment. "Why, we attacked you, we killed millions of your people, why would you help us?" "Because we are neighbors now," Tors said simply, "and neighbors help each other." The Vraxians did not know how to respond to this. Their entire culture was built on strength and domination. The strong took from the weak. The winners destroyed the losers. This was the natural order of things. And yet here were the humans, who had won the war completely, offering to help instead of destroy. Over the following weeks, the human volunteers spread across Vrax Prime. They set up hospitals to treat the sick and injured. They built shelters for those who had lost their homes. They brought in equipment to clean the polluted water and air. At first, many Vraxians were suspicious. They expected tricks, traps, hidden weapons, but the humans just kept working. They treated Vraxian patients with the same care they would treat human patients. They shared their food with hungry Vraxian children. They worked side by side with Vraxian workers to rebuild homes and schools. Slowly, very slowly, the suspicion began to fade. One day, a young Vraxian child approached Commander Tors while he was helping to repair a damaged water system. The child was small and thin, with the same large black eyes as all Vraxians. "My father says you are strange," the child said. Tors looked down at her and smiled. "Oh, why does he say that?" "Because you could hurt us but you do not, he says this is strange." Tors knelt down so he was at the child's eye level. "What is your name?" "Nira." "Well, Nira, let me ask you something. If someone hurt you by mistake and then they said sorry and wanted to be friends, would you forgive them?" Nira thought about this. "Maybe, if they were really sorry." "That is all we are doing," Tors said. "Your people hurt us, it was terrible, but now your people are sorry and they want to be friends, so we forgive them, and we help them, because that is how you make new friends." Nira nodded slowly. "I think I understand. My teacher says humans are very strange, but I think maybe you are just different." Tors laughed. "Different is a good word. We are definitely different." The child ran off to join her friends. Tors watched her go, feeling a warmth in his chest. This was why they were here, not for politics or strategy, but for children like Nira who deserved a chance to grow up in peace. Back on the Galactic Council station, Ambassador Vortek was having a very difficult time. His government had ordered him to file a formal protest against the human policy of mercy. The Krillian Empire believed that such weakness would encourage other species to attack humanity, knowing they would not face serious consequences if they lost. But Vortek was not so sure anymore. He had spent the past 3 months studying human history. He had learned about their wars, their conflicts, their struggles, and he had noticed something remarkable. Every time the humans had shown mercy to a defeated enemy, they had gained an ally. Every time they had been harsh and vindictive, they had created more enemies. The pattern was clear and consistent throughout their history. Perhaps Vortek thought the humans were not weak at all. Perhaps they were simply playing a longer game than anyone else understood. He decided to visit Vrax Prime himself. He wanted to see this mercy in action. What he found there shocked him. The human relief workers were everywhere. They were building homes, treating patients, teaching children, and the Vraxians were beginning to respond. For the first time in their history, they were experiencing kindness from outsiders. Vortek watched a human doctor treating a sick Vraxian child. The doctor was gentle and patient, explaining everything she was doing to the worried parents. The parents looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "You saved our daughter," the father said. "We owe you a debt we can never repay." The doctor shook her head. "You owe us nothing. This is what we do. We help people who need help." Vortek felt something shift inside him, something he could not name. It was an uncomfortable feeling, like realizing that everything you believed was wrong. He sought out Commander Tors and found him helping to build a new school. "Commander," Vortek said, "may I speak with you?" Tors wiped sweat from his forehead and nodded. "Of course, Ambassador, what can I do for you?" I have been watching your people work, Vortex said slowly. I have seen things I do not understand, but I am beginning to think, perhaps I should try to understand. Tors smiled. That is all we can ask, Ambassador. Understanding is the first step. In my culture, we believe that mercy is weakness. We believe that showing kindness to enemies will only encourage more attacks, but I am not seeing weakness here. I am seeing something else. I am not sure what to call it. Some might call it strength, Tors suggested. The strength to break the cycle of violence, the strength to choose a better path even when it is harder. Vortex considered this. Perhaps I need to think more about this. He returned to the council station with a lot to think about, and for the first time in his 300 years he began to question the fundamental beliefs of his culture. 6 months after the surrender, the Galactic Council held another meeting. This time, the topic was whether to censure humanity for their irresponsible treatment of the Vraxians. The Thraxian delegate had proposed the motion. They argued that humanity's mercy was dangerous to galactic stability. If defeated enemies were rewarded instead of punished, it would encourage more wars. Species would attack others knowing they faced no real consequences for losing. Admiral Chen stood before the council once again, but this time she was not alone. Standing beside her was Ambassador Zyrith of Vraxia. Before you vote, Admiral Chen said, I would like Ambassador Zyrith to speak. The council granted permission, though some delegates looked uncomfortable. It was unusual for a defeated species to address the council. Zyrith stepped forward. His posture had changed since the last meeting. He no longer looked beaten and afraid. He stood tall and spoke clearly. I have come to tell you what has happened on my world, he said. When we surrendered, we expected death, we expected slavery, we expected the humans to do to us what we had done to them. Instead, he paused, his voice catching. Instead, they sent doctors to heal our sick. They sent builders to repair our homes. They sent teachers to educate our children. They gave us something we never expected. They gave us hope. The council was silent. Even the Thraxian delegate had stopped making their crystalline sounds of disapproval. I was a soldier before I became a diplomat, Zyrith continued. I fought against the humans, I killed some of them, I believed we were right to attack them because they were weak and we were strong. That is what I was taught. He shook his head. I was wrong, so very wrong. The humans are not weak, they are stronger than any species I have ever known because they have the strength to forgive. They have the strength to see enemies as future friends. They have the strength to build instead of destroy. He turned to face Admiral Chen. On behalf of the Vraxian people, I make this pledge. We will never attack humanity again, not because we fear them but because we have learned to respect them, and one day we hope to call them friends. Admiral Chen nodded gravely. We accept your pledge, Ambassador, and we look forward to that friendship. The vote on the censure motion was held immediately after. It failed by a large margin. Many delegates who had been confused or hostile before had changed their minds. Ambassador Vortex had been the key voice in defeating the motion. He had spoken eloquently about what he had witnessed on Vrax Prime. He had described the transformation he was seeing in the Vraxian people, and he had suggested that perhaps the galaxy had something to learn from humanity. After the meeting, Vortex approached Admiral Chen. I still do not fully understand your concept of mercy, he admitted, but I am beginning to see its power. You have done something remarkable, Admiral. You have turned an enemy into an ally without firing another shot. That was always the goal, Admiral Chen said. Wars are easy to start and hard to end, but if you can end them with friendship instead of hatred, you ensure they stay ended. My government is reconsidering its position, Vortex said. They have seen the reports from Vrax Prime. They have seen how your mercy is changing things. Some of them are asking questions they have never asked before. Admiral Chen smiled. That is all we can hope for, Ambassador. Questions are the beginning of change. On Vrax Prime, the reconstruction continued. Human and Vraxian workers labored side by side. Children played together in the new schools. Families shared meals and stories. The wounds of war were slowly healing. One evening, Commander Tors sat with Kyrath, the Vraxian official who had met him when he first landed. They watched the sunset together, two former enemies sharing a moment of peace. I never thought this would be possible, Kyrath said. When the war ended, I thought our people were doomed. I thought the humans would make us suffer for generations. That would have been a waste, Tors said. Suffering just creates more suffering. We wanted something different. But how did you do it? Kyrath asked. How did you convince your people to show mercy to those who had hurt them so badly? Tors thought about this for a long moment. It was not easy. Many humans were angry, many wanted revenge, but our leaders reminded us of our history. They reminded us of all the times we had shown mercy and created peace. And they reminded us of all the times we had sought revenge and created more war. We had to choose, he continued. We could be ruled by our worst instincts or we could be guided by our best hopes. We chose hope, and I think we chose wisely. Kyrath was quiet for a while, then she said, I have a daughter. She was born during the war. She has never known anything but fear and hunger, but yesterday she came home from school laughing. Laughing, I had never heard her laugh before. Tors felt a lump in his throat. That is why we are here, for children who deserve to laugh. Thank you, Kyrath said simply. Thank you for giving my daughter a future. As the sun set on Vrax Prime, it rose on a new era for the galaxy. The humans had shown that there was another way, a way beyond hatred and revenge, a way toward healing and hope. And slowly, very slowly, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to listen. 1 year after the surrender, the galaxy was changing in ways no one had predicted. The Vraxian recovery was proceeding faster than anyone had expected. Human assistance had helped stabilize their economy, repair their infrastructure, and restore their food production. More importantly, the Vraxian people themselves were changing. For centuries, Vraxian culture had been based on conquest and domination. They had attacked their neighbors because that was what strong species did. It was their way of proving their worth. But now they were learning a different way. Human teachers had come to Vrax Prime to share their history, their philosophy, their approach to conflict resolution, and the Vraxians were listening. Young Nira, the child who had spoken to Commander Tors, was now one of the top students in her school. She had become fascinated with human culture and spent hours reading about Earth's history. She was particularly interested in the stories of reconciliation, of enemies becoming friends, of wounds being healed through understanding. Teacher, she said one day, why did no one ever teach us this before? Why did we always think war was the only way? Her teacher, a human woman named Dr. Alina Reyes, smiled sadly. Because war is easier, Nira. It is easier to hate than to understand. It is easier to destroy than to build. Learning a better way takes courage and patience. But it is worth it, Nira said with the certainty of youth. It is so much better to have friends than enemies. Yes, Dr. Reyes agreed. Yes, it is. The changes on Vrax Prime were being noticed throughout the galaxy. Delegates from other species were visiting to see the transformation for themselves. Most of them left confused, but some left inspired. Ambassador Vortek had become one of humanity's strongest supporters on the Galactic Council. He had returned to Vrax Prime several times, watching the progress with growing amazement. He had begun to introduce some of humanity's concepts to his own people. It was not easy. The Krillian Empire had 300 years of tradition to overcome. But Vortek was persistent. He gave speeches about what he had witnessed. He showed recordings of humans and Vraxians working together. He shared the stories of children like Nira who were growing up with new ideas about how the galaxy could work. Some Krillians listened, some rejected his message completely, but the conversation had begun. On Earth, there was debate about how far the policy of mercy should extend. Some humans argued that they had been too generous, that the Vraxians did not deserve such kindness after what they had done. Others believed that mercy was always the right choice, regardless of the circumstances. Admiral Chen addressed these concerns in a famous speech before the Earth Parliament. I understand the anger, she said. I share it. I lost my husband and my son to Vraxian weapons. Every day I think about what they took from me. Every day I feel the weight of that loss. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I also think about what kind of future I want. Do I want a future where we are always at war, where our children grow up knowing nothing but violence and hatred, where we become the very thing we fought against? She shook her head firmly. No, I want a future where our children can play with Vraxian children, where our grandchildren can visit Vrax Prime as friends and allies, where the memory of this war is a lesson, not a curse. That is why we show mercy, not because we are weak, not because we have forgotten, but because we are strong enough to imagine a better world and brave enough to try to build it. The speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy. It was translated into hundreds of languages, and for many beings it was the first time they had ever considered that strength could mean something other than domination. 2 years after the surrender, something remarkable happened. The Vraxians applied to join the Galactic Council as full members. This was unprecedented. Normally, a defeated species would be excluded from galactic affairs for generations, but the humans supported the application and their influence had grown considerably. The debate in the council was fierce. Many delegates argued that the Vraxians had not earned a seat at the table. They had been aggressors, attackers, war criminals. They should be punished, not rewarded. But other delegates pointed to the transformation that had taken place on Vrax Prime. They spoke of the new Vraxian constitution, which explicitly rejected conquest and aggression. They described the cultural changes, the new schools, the growing friendship between humans and Vraxians. Ambassador Zyrith addressed the council. "We come before you not to deny our past," he said. "We cannot deny it. We attacked humanity, we killed millions, we caused immense suffering. This is our shame and we will carry it forever." He stood tall, his large eyes reflecting the lights of the council chamber. "But we also come before you to speak of our future. We have learned a new way. We have learned from humanity that strength is not about domination. It is about building, creating, healing. We have learned that mercy is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. We ask you to give us a chance to prove ourselves, not as conquerors but as partners, not as enemies but as friends. We believe we can contribute to this galaxy in ways we never imagined before." The vote was close, but the Vraxian application was approved. For the first time in galactic history, a defeated aggressor was welcomed back into the community of worlds through the pathway of reconciliation rather than revenge. Admiral Chen was present for the vote. She watched as Ambassador Zyrith celebrated with his delegation. She saw the tears in their eyes, the disbelief on their faces. They had expected death and they had received life. They had expected hatred and they had received forgiveness. Later Zyrith approached her. "Admiral," he said, "I do not have words to express what this means to my people. You have given us something we never deserved." "We have given you a chance," Chen said. "What you do with it is up to you." "We will not waste it," Zyrith promised. "We will make you proud. We will show the galaxy that mercy is never wasted." Chen nodded. "I believe you will." As the celebration continued, Chen stepped outside onto an observation deck. She looked out at the stars, thinking about everything that had happened. About the war, the suffering, the long road to this moment. Her husband would have been proud, she thought. He had always believed in the power of forgiveness. Even when he was dying, his last words had been about hope, not hatred. "We did it, Marcus," she whispered to the stars. "We found another way." 5 years after the surrender, the galaxy was a different place. The Vraxians had become model citizens of the Galactic Council. They had transformed their military into a relief and rescue force. Instead of attacking other worlds, they now helped worlds in crisis. They were often the first to respond to natural disasters, epidemics, and humanitarian emergencies. Commander Tors had become the human ambassador to Vrax Prime. He had fallen in love with the planet and its people. He had even married a Vraxian woman, a scientist named Kyrath, the same official who had met him when he first landed. Their wedding was the first human-Vraxian union in history. It was broadcast across the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who were still trying to understand this strange new relationship between former enemies. "Are you sure about this?" Tor's mother had asked before the ceremony, "after everything they did to us." "Mom," Tors had replied, "Kyrath didn't do anything to us. The war was started by leaders who are no longer in power. The people who fought are seeking to make amends, and Kyrath herself has dedicated her life to building peace between our peoples." His mother had been silent for a long moment, then she had hugged him. "You're right," she said. "You're absolutely right. I'm sorry for asking." The wedding was beautiful. Human and Vraxian traditions were blended together. Tors wore a traditional Earth suit while Kyrath wore a Vraxian gown of flowing silver fabric. They exchanged vows that spoke of unity, understanding, and hope for the future. Young Nira, now a teenager, served as one of the flower girls. She had become something of a celebrity on both worlds, a symbol of the new generation that was growing up without the hatred of the past. "This is what the future looks like," Admiral Chen said in her toast to the couple. "Not war and revenge but love and understanding, not walls but bridges, not enemies but family." The toast was met with thunderous applause from both human and Vraxian guests. Ambassador Vortek was also present at the wedding. He had become one of humanity's closest friends in the council. His own culture was slowly changing, influenced by the example he had set. "You know," he said to Chen during the reception, "when I first heard about your policy of mercy, I thought you were insane. I thought you were the weakest species in the galaxy." Chen smiled. "And now? Now I think you might be the strongest, certainly the wisest." He shook his large head. "My people are learning from you. It is slow, but it is happening. For the first time in 300 years, we are talking about something other than conquest and domination." "Change takes time," Chen said. "The important thing is that it is happening." "Indeed," Vortek raised his glass, "to humanity, the species that taught the galaxy a new way to be strong." 5 years after the surrender, Admiral Sarah Chen retired. She had given decades of her life to the military, to diplomacy, to the endless work of building peace. Now she wanted to rest. But there was one more thing she wanted to do first. She traveled to Vrax Prime, to a small garden that had been created in memory of all those who had died in the war. It was a beautiful place filled with flowers from both Earth and Vraxia. Human and Vraxian names were carved into the walls, the dead remembered together. Chen walked slowly through the garden. She found her husband's name on one wall, her son's on another. She touched the carved letters gently, feeling the stone beneath her fingers. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I didn't let the hatred win, I found another way." She stood there for a long time, remembering, grieving, but also feeling something like peace. A young Vraxian child approached her. She recognized him as the son of Kyrath and Tors, a bright-eyed boy named Michael after Tors' father. "Are you sad?" Michael asked. Chen smiled through her tears. "A little, but mostly I am grateful." "Why are you grateful?" "Because of you," Chen said. "Because you exist, because your parents found each other despite everything that happened, because you represent a future I could only dream of." Michael nodded seriously, the way children do when they are trying to understand adult things. "My mom says you are a hero. She says you saved her people." "I just did what I thought was right," Chen said. "That is all any of us can do." Michael took her hand. "Do you want to see my favorite flower? It is a rose. My dad brought it from Earth. It is very pretty." Chen let the child lead her through the garden. He showed her the rose bush, a beautiful red rose that had been transplanted from Earth and was now thriving in Vraxian soil. "It is beautiful," Chen agreed. "My dad says roses can grow anywhere if you give them love and care," Michael said. "He says people are the same way." Chen felt tears on her cheeks again, but this time they were tears of joy. "Your father is a wise man," she said, "and he is absolutely right." They stood together in the garden, the old human warrior and the young half-Vraxian boy, watching the roses bloom in the light of an alien sun. Around them, the memorial garden was quiet and peaceful, a place of remembrance and hope. 5 years after the surrender, the galaxy had learned something important. It had learned that mercy was not weakness. It had learned that forgiveness was not foolishness. It had learned that the strongest species in the galaxy were not those who destroyed their enemies, but those who turned their enemies into friends. And it had learned these lessons from humanity, from the strange, emotional, illogical species that chose to help instead of hurt, to build instead of destroy, to love instead of hate. The galaxy was still dangerous. There were still wars and conflicts. There were still species who believed in conquest and domination, but there was also a new idea spreading across the stars, an idea that peace was possible, that enemies could become allies, that mercy was the highest form of strength. It was a human idea, and slowly, very slowly, the galaxy was beginning to believe it. In the Garden of Remembrance, Admiral Sarah Chen took a deep breath of the flower-scented air. She thought about everything that had happened: the war, the suffering, the long, difficult road to peace. And then she thought about young Michael, holding her hand and showing her roses. That, she realized, was the future: not war and revenge, but children playing in gardens; not hatred and fear, but hope and love; not enemies, but family. It had all been worth it. Every struggle, every sacrifice, every act of mercy, every moment of forgiveness, it had all been worth it. Because this was what humanity had always been working toward: not conquest but connection, not domination but understanding, not the end of their enemies but the beginning of friendship. And in that garden on Vrax Prime, surrounded by flowers from two worlds, Admiral Sarah Chen smiled. They had done it. They had found another way. And the galaxy would never be the same.